Hey, my friends, I think you're going to find this episode so inspiring and also really interesting. So get ready for a great listen. I brought in my very good friend, Miriam Campbell, to talk about how we deal with relationships all over the place, right? How do we deal with when someone else feels kind of like they're threatening to us by who they are? Like, how do I connect to someone if, they are completely against what it is that I need? They're trying to come over when I'm in the middle of bedtime, or, my kid won't go out the door, or my husband is behaving in one way, and I just feel like we need to have more structure and order, and he's being super spontaneous. These are things that come up a lot in my community. And I really wanted to talk to Miriam because she works on, her business is called Skills for Connection. She works so much in social skills, but also personally, as her friend, she's someone who is able to connect to so many people in such a very real way. And I wanted to kind of pick her brain and see where she's coming from and how that works for her. So we got into a lot of really interesting topics. I know you're going to love it and enjoy.
Thanks for having
Miriam
me.
Campbell, thanks for coming on the How to Go podcast.
Thank you for having me here. It is so great to be in a place where I've learned so much. So thank you.
That's awesome.
True
I feel
story.
like most people in my life, I see them on the screen all the time. And then when I see them in person, I'm like, yay, there's no computer between us. And like, we're the opposite. I see you usually in person. Barry's one of my good friends. And now I'm seeing you on the screen. I'm like, oh, this is like a client's experience. This is fun.
It's like funny to like talk with you. I'm like having a wig on my head, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yes. This is very strange. Okay. So basically, Miriam doesn't really know exactly where we're going with this conversation. I have just had lots of different ideas. And Miriam, you should know that you're one of my gurus in life. And
Oh, whoa.
very much so in terms of how I strive to connect to other people. And one thing that everyone should know about Miriam Campbell is that, like, she just makes everyone feel so important. And she just has the capacity to hold so many people and to think about them and to know what's going on with them. And me, on the other hand, like, I have such a tendency sometimes when I like want to connect to someone and they ask about me. This is what I do with you, probably. Like, I'll just tell you about what's going on with me. And then the conversation ends and I'm like, oh, but we didn't connect because that was so one-sided. Like, I want to know what's happening with you, but the conversation's over now. So that's why you're my guru, because I'm always thinking like, how would Miriam do this, or what would she think, or how does she? And it's a beautiful thing to see. It's really a beautiful thing. I want to have you share a little bit about like professionally and also maybe personally, like how you became such a guru, but you just found out you're a guru. But also,
I'm like, Kayla, what are you talking about? Like, I like have come to you so many times and like I listen to your podcast like a podcast junkie person because like I learned so much. So like I'm grateful that to hear that I've been able to share that with you because I feel like so much of the way I think about things is based on what I've learned from you. So
I guess that's what makes a good
really
friendship,
well.
though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That had that D, as my aunt Tantan used to say. Ritual.
Um, so I also kind of want to bring this into, this came up in the call last night. That's why, like, you don't really know this random turn that I'm taking, but it's inside our community. We were talking about this very common thing where a woman will feel like she's like the responsible one in the relationship, and he's kind of just like not so serious or not so responsible. And I think there's so much socialization of like, oh, girls are always told like, oh, you're much more mature than boys, and take it or leave it if there's truth to it, but we're definitely told it, right? And so then what does that do when we come into a relationship with a guy we're supposed to have respect for, and we've been told our whole life that we're way more mature than him? And then it can create the system where like, then we take over all the responsible, mature things, and that just exacerbates the problem, because now we're like this serious, mature person, which then we're like, I don't want to be serious. I want to glow. I want to be able to be light. I want to be able to, not be annoyed when he says something spontaneous or gives an idea or something like that, or is wild with the kids at bedtime, whatever the thing is. And I was thinking about how, what I wanted to kind of get your professional opinion on. And so just start this conversation, but then I want you to introduce yourself, but is how do we connect with somebody else, whether it's our husband or a neighbor or a child, when on some level their way of being almost feels like a threat to what's important to us. Like, so for our kids, right? Like, I'm trying to get out the door. This kid feels like a threat to me. Like, how am I supposed to connect to you right now? Right. And, we can get into the model or not, but I really want to sort of focus more on what what you share and what you bring to the table. And so that's kind of where I want to start the conversation, if that's cool for you.
Yeah, totally.
Amazing.
Yeah, as you're
So introduce
talking, like,
yourself first, though, because we want to I want to make sure everyone knows who you are and like what you do.
So I help support parents support their kids with social skills. And I believe that social skills always come from the underneath skills because like there's a lot of like tips and tools of like how to, make connection, navigate like just like surface level. But we don't want just for our kids or for ourselves just to have like, okay, I know how to like have a conversation during kiddish. That is an important skill to be able to start a relationship, but I teach about the skills of how to make the relationship actually be able to be something that they could have long-term friendships and long-term relationships and, hopefully for our kids to be able to have marriages and lives. And so the tools that we work with are like the underlying skills of self-awareness, relationship skills, problem solving, learning how to navigate ourselves so we can connect to other. As you're talking, I feel the emotions of this disconnect when it's like, I want to be a self in this relationship in a certain way. And I feel like I can't because of other. And sort of like that space when like the other has their self and I have myself. Like I want to leave the house, for example, and the other is having their own world, their own process, of their own experience. Or I have how I want to show up as fun during bedtime, but I'm scared that the other is going to perform XYZ. And so I'm not going to be able to be myself. Or I'm not going to be able to, that sort of like the conflict between or the dissonance between self and other. That's what I'm hearing in that question. Did I get it right?
Yeah,
Did I
and
hear
I
what you're
think,
saying?
I guess where like I come in too is that it's not even necessarily distance between self and other. It's also it's distance between self and my perception of other. Meaning,
Oh, yes.
her husband isn't
Yes.
necessarily immature, but
Right.
if you're operating from that story, but you could still say the way that they're showing up in that moment might still feel like a
So,
threat. Might still feel
yes. And I find like this all the time. Like a parent will tell me, I don't see my child as capable. I don't see like I see my child as like awkward. I see them so like I sort of like they're trying to say something to me. They're trying to connect. They're doing it in such an off way that like it's so hard to connect to them. It's so hard to actually see them and actually respect them and actually even enjoy them and love them. And just because they're doing it in such a difficult way. They're being so difficult. And one of the things that I think about for myself, like whenever I'm working with the client or working with the parent, like the step one is always, always, always connecting inwards to finding our bigness to be able to then connect to the child's bigness. So like, for example, one time I was one time, haha, recently, I was feeling very frustrated with one of my children. And I felt myself, I was like, gonna lose it. So like, I went to my room and I started to like really process, like, okay, like, I'm so tired. I woke up 3 times last night with the baby. And then this one woke up at 5 and this one, whatever. And I just physically feel tired. And I was just like thinking about all the things I had said to them I was trying to, get them to school or get them to do what they need to do. And I started like to think to myself, like, oh, of course you're tired. Of course you're feeling at your edge. And like, you are trying so hard to take care of these kids. And even during the night, you were taking care of them. And even during, and like sort of like let myself really feel that like the exhaustion of it and the even the resentment or the frustration of that of my own self and my own process. And as I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, whoa, look how many things just today you did to try and take care of your family, to try and take care. You are such a good mother.
Mhm.
And
I
I
want to
like
break
felt
apart what you
inside of my
just
head.
said and make sure that like everyone's hearing the nuances here because we talk a lot about allowing our feelings, processing our feelings, and it can be confusing in the beginning because someone could think, okay, so if I want to allow my frustration with my kid, either that means I'm going to go scream at them or
Well, I think this is going to show. I think this is going to show how it comes. Sorry, do you mind if
go.
'cause so, like, as, like, I sort of visited inward and, like, as you say, Kayla, like, dip into the feeling, like, allow yourself to experience it, like, really, like, visit what's happening in my body, visit what's happening in my thoughts, and I did it by myself. I went to my room because I didn't know what was gonna come out if I did when I did this. Like, I was a little bit nervous of myself, I was not feeling in my nurturing, loving space, and as I dipped into this, I actually found my wellspring of love. Because then I was like, oh my gosh, not even love of them, but love of myself. Like, wow, I'm such a good mother. I did that for my child. I did that for my child. I did that
but
for my
you know
child
to
and
speak
any
to
mother.
yourself that way. How did you know to speak?
Well,
That's the piece that I want
I,
you to pull out.
oh, well, one thing, and I'm going to to the end part, which is
Sorry.
then I could cut out and talk to my kids in a way of loving because I identified as a loving person and then I could connect to them. But now let's break it down. But the point is
Hold
that, like,
on.
like you were saying, is like the fear of connecting with our feelings is like actually our gateway to actually connecting with other. Like in order for me to then actually reaccess my child and be able to connect with them and figure out, okay, so what is actually their problem when they can't get out the door? What is actually their problem when they can't have to be inflexible about this game or when they don't know how to respect another person's boundaries? Like I can't even see them
Yep.
when I'm in myself. I think I'm relating to them. I think I'm problem solving. But like I'm sort of like doing it outside of myself with my hands. And like it's not
Yeah.
like, sometimes I need to do that. Sometimes you need to do that. That's just how, but like when we have the opportunity to connect inwards, to be able to like say like, okay, ugly starting space. Yep. Not pretty starting space. Okay. Visit it. And then through that visitation, like at our cores, we are neshamas. So like when we actually allow ourselves to dip inwards and to like experience who we are in our core, past the frustration, past the difficult thoughts, past the difficult emotions is our core neshama. So like it's almost like our gateway. Like we don't have to be like, oh my gosh, if I visit this negative thought, I'm going to then, scream and yell. I'm not leaving this space until I could find a place of goodness because that is at my core. I'm not really at my core to connect until I found that goodness. It's there. It's gonna be there.
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. No, 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 no.
I
So
felt
good.
like that was connected to it. Like it's connected
Yeah.
to like that fear of that danger of I don't want to visit it. But we don't have to be afraid to visit it because we're going to find the goodness and then we find our energy because at our core, it's Hashem's going to be the one who's energizing us because he's at our cores.
I think we'll find it if we understand that what it means to visit our emotions is not to
Danielle.
stir them up. Meaning, when we say go and dip into what's coming up for you, that doesn't mean go into your room and think about all the times your husband betrayed you or disappointed you. Like maybe you need to a little bit, but that's not the process. The process is not let me really dive in to this and like
You don't
almost
have to invent
exacerbate.
things that you're not feeling in that moment.
Right. Right. And I think that if a person
Like,
is new to the idea of allowing their emotions, they might think that that's what they're supposed to do. That what they need to do is to now like really like, okay, if I'm supposed to feel angry now, like let me feel all my anger and let me like dredge it up. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like that could thinking that they're supposed to do something else could maybe almost put them on the wrong path. And then they won't naturally find what you're talking about. What you're saying is on the other side of all that emotion is your neshama, is you. And that's beautiful. And that has all the right intentions and all the connection and all the love that you're looking for. Right?
yeah. Yeah. And I think like even let's say like what to get back to what you said about like what people are concerned about is like parents will tell me all the time, like, their child falls and they'll be like, we like so many people now all the time are saying like, oh, don't say you're fine, you're fine. If your child's upset, then say like, oh, you're upset. But here's the thing that's interesting is we want to be honest. So like we try and mirror back what they actually are feeling. Like I think that's why like when you go to Shiva house, you let the person talk first because you want to mirror where they're at. Like
Mhm.
if let's say they're in a place where they're not ready to grieve in XYZ place, they don't want you coming in and crying more than they're crying. That's not being there for them. That's like creating, all the resentment of the husband that you're not actually feeling in this exact moment, but like maybe you're feeling X, but you're not feeling YZ. So like that sensitivity to actually be with our kids or to be with ourselves, that honesty of knowing, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm not inventing something that's not. I don't have to tell my child, oh my gosh, you have this wound on your leg and it's so painful and it's oozing blood, it's cascading, whatever. They think you're going to die. We can just like reflect back where they actually are. So like that moment of pause of just sort of looking and seeing other,
Mhm.
you know, and then being able to reflect back where they actually are. So like what you had said was, um, not it's the honesty of like when we dip inwards and when we dip into the other, reflecting accurately what it is. So that way they feel seen. We're not going to do less. Like they're really upset about what happened at school. Oh, honey, tomorrow you won't notice it. They're not actually reflecting back an honest representation of what they're experiencing. They're not actually going to even be able to process or learn how to dip into their own selves to be able to move beyond if it's not even something that's an accurate reflection back.
And the reason that we're doing that is we're so uncomfortable in the moment, right? Like,
Yeah, I
why
think
do I try to
we're scared.
minimize
If
what's
I
going
do
on?
this, right. If I like tell my child how hard it is for them, then they're going to think, oh my gosh, it's so hard. Like, I remember I had a friend who was like, debating if she should go to therapy over something that had happened. She's like, I don't want it to be right now with like, 15% of my world. And I don't want if I go to therapy and talk about it, talk about it, talk about it for it to become 90% of my world if it's really only 15% of my world.
Mm.
And it makes sense logically, except that you understand how the psyche works, which is if you have part of your brain that needs to protect that 15%, then it's not really 15%. It's really going to be 15% plus anything that's near that 15% that's coding it to protect it. And then anything that might remind you of it. And then at the end of your day, a lot of your brain is being spent trying to protect yourself from reviewing that 15%. Versus if you spend 90% of your day for, let's say, however much time, I can't give you a time frame of how long a process takes, but addressing it, then after that, short window of
Right.
time of processing it, then you actually have your whole brain available to you. And then you can actually use that 15% of experience to help make your whole brain wiser, make your whole brain more loving, more compassionate, more, engaged because it doesn't have to avoid that component of it.
You're saying, so if you're, let's say you validate the kid and you are there and you are really responding, it could be that they're gonna now like, meaning now we're putting on a microcosm, right? They could be that now all of a sudden it becomes 100% of the situation is how much it hurts, but then they're able to move on, as opposed to, we talk about this all the time with our thoughts, right? Like, you don't wanna think that your husband is a little bit disgusting sometimes, let's say, like, especially with like newly married, they're like, "You can't think that about my husband. I'm supposed to love him," right? And so then we're like not thinking it, not thinking it, not thinking it. And then it's like actually this thing that we're trying really, really hard not to avoid. And when we just look at it and we're like, sometimes boys are smelly. Oh, okay, fine. We can move on. Like, doesn't have to be like such a big thing. I want to circle back to kind of what you were saying about the light though, when if you're not able to connect to yourself, then you're kind of like, your hands are doing the parenting, but like not your whole self. And this reminds me a lot of what I see, and so much my experience as a newlywed was like in the beginning, you know, feeling like very triggered left and right because like all of a sudden, like everything is now this is the rest of your life, right? Like, so now everything is all suddenly very, very concerning and like important and needs to be dealt with. And then I didn't like that. And I went to like all the Sean Bias classes and read all the books. And then I was like a really, really great robot wife that sometimes totally fell apart, right? And I see this even with coaching sometimes. Be like, oh well, I'm using, I know that I made lots of mistakes. I'm like, what are you talking about? Is that, if we learn all the things of the shoulds, which we do
Mhm.
want to know, we want to have a picture of, what is, if I don't know that like it's my responsibility to make sure my children have clean clothes, or that I, try to listen to my husband's Torah and remember anything that he said. So then I'm functioning without tools, like you said in the beginning, right? But to do it in a robotic way, then we're not even there in the relationship. There's no one for them really truly to connect to. And that's kind of where that's where coaching for me came in was, sort of like all the Shalom Bias stuff created like a really nice robot most of the time, like 80% of the time. But then I had to sort of get into something that allowed me to show up to that and me to be okay with the difficult emotions and me to be okay with how do I deal with like disappointment or frustration or all the stuff
Mhm.
that's coming up for me, so that I'm doing these things because I want to, not because I'm trying
That
to
you're
be
there.
a good wife. I'm there and I want to connect to him, and these are my tools to create that connection.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So many. So many, but mostly right now I'm just feeling the feeling of it, of like that, and I'm thinking actually of the model. One of the most brilliant things that you said to me, is in the model of I don't know how many of our listeners are familiar. If they're not familiar, then they should become familiar by joining your group. But I remember one of the calls you had mentioned, I talking about like what you put in your results
Mhm.
mind, and how that really was a paradigm shift for me. Because if let's say you think about your results as connection, then your should is not going to be your results. Meaning like
Mm.
I'm not
Yeah,
explaining this
no.
well, but the idea of like if my goal is connection and my goal is being playful, or bringing myself to the relationship, not just doing the robotic action, but actually allowing my heart to be there, then like I have to think about really what works for me to get there. Not like, saying, acting the act. I remember when I was newly married and I would have like my husband would do something, and suddenly I'd go into like judgment mode.
Mm.
And so then I would start being very polite and be like, oh man, where did you go? I'd be like, I can't tell you. And he'd be like, "Why?" Like, I'm like, "'Cause it's too mean. I can't tell you what I'm thinking because it's just too mean." And he's like, "Oh, it's way meaner to act distant like this. It's way meaner." So
Wow.
I would sometimes say something like, "Well, I'm judging you for putting your yarmulke like that," or whatever, or something dumb, really dumb. And he'd be like, "Okay, I'm judging you for judging me about the yarmulke," and then we could laugh and move on. You know what I mean? Like
That's a great
when
answer. That is a great
and
response.
it's almost like looking at what it is much less scary when you take this thing that otherwise is controlling you. Like I was saying about the 15% of the brain, when it's controlling us when we can't clarify what it is. And we don't, which is a lot of the work Kayla Lee do is just like sort of like, let's see it in a sentence. Let's put all those emotions, all this process, all this drama that's happening that's usually described spinning out, and let's contain it in a sentence. And which is a lot of what, when people do trauma therapy and talk therapy, it's like taking something in the brain that feels so like it's flashes of images or colors and ideas, and it's so encompassing and it can feel like so, it's that you have to protect that 15% because it's just so terrifying. And to be able to actually look at it and contain it in words will sometimes give your body permission to visit it because like, oh, this is less daunting. And sometimes you have to work the other way where you're like visiting your body and then the words come out because you're listening to what your body's telling you those words are. It's incredible how Hashem made us like this beautiful mechanism where like integrated components when we are honest. It's really like Hashem's seal is honesty, and it comes down to being honest with our experience, being honest with our struggles. Like, I am frustrated. I am resentful. I am judgmental. I am, jealous. And I think like it's something that, I know like there's a lot of discussion like, oh, don't an angry person X, a jealous person X, like Hashem, you can't be in Hashem's Shekhinah can't rest. And like, so it's almost scary to think of myself as like, oh, do I have jealousy? Like, oh, no. Or do I have anger? No, I can't because I can't think of the fact that Hashem's Shekhinah might not be with me. Like, I can't engage with the fact that I struggle in this. So like being able to like think of it as like, understanding what first of all, the phraseology of the Gemara, why they said it like that. Who were they talking to who may have needed to hear it like that versus, oh, I'm X, I'm driven off if I have this bad midah to be able to, oh, I'm a human being who has all different types of midahs. My child is a human being. My spouse is a human being, and being able to engage honestly with what we're experiencing. That doesn't therefore mean like, okay, I have anger. I can melt into my worst rage, but like I have anger and let me look at it and let me process this tool that Hashem has given me, because all of our experiences are the tools that we need to be able to access him, to be able to connect to others, to connect to him, the other day I was like very, very tired. And one of my kids said, oh, what, like, I was like, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I kept saying it like, I'm so tired. And so my son's like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, okay, great. Maybe I should get the problem solving in this process. And I was like, hey, what am I going to do? And I was like, what can I do with tiredness? I can dive into Hashem for help right now. Cause like, I'm not an opportunity where I could rest right now, but I can dive into Hashem. Like all of our experiences, our honest experiences are going to be our venue for connection. And that always starts inside because we are the self that's connecting to Hashem. We are the self that's connecting to our husband. We are the self that's connecting to our children, to our neighbor, to our spouse, I already said spouse, to our coworkers, to our everyone we engage with. So like when we have an opportunity to tune inwards as self, as wives, to take the time to be like, okay, let me actually see who I am in this space. And then to be able to reach outwards from that space to others. And sometimes it's more deep and sometimes it's less deep.
And I think that for people who have had the experience of spending, if someone's go-to is to really shame or really be very hard on themselves, what I want to add here is that I think that one thing that you offer, and one thing that I really hope that I believe we have that's very much in our community, is when you learn to look at yourself with somebody who's looking at you who sees your best self. It's an
Mm.
extremely healing process, right? So I know that anyone who's on a call with you, who's doing parent coaching with you, you see their inherent goodness. So they might be scared to stop and tune into themselves in a way because that's been an abusive relationship, like that's been a not safe place to be. And I think people get stuck with what to do. And what I've learned, and there's research on this, is that the relationship creates that. The other person can create that, can model for you, and sort of give you those ways of thinking about yourself. And it's not even necessarily literally. You might not need to feed them the words, but just having someone like you looking at them and seeing their best possible self is in itself a very healing thing, and something that I think a lot of us, can benefit from. And even just to think about it in terms of the friends that we spend time with, or, when we speak to our parents, like what we want to bring up, the things that we know will get that kind of that resonant feedback, that we're good, we're doing the right thing, we're on our way, we're trying, we're inherently good. And from a place of inherent goodness, we can handle if we make a mistake.
Hmm. I love this.
I want to
I
say,
think
I know we don't have tons of time, but I can't not try to get in this last thing, which is what we were originally going to talk about, because I just really want to hear what you have to say. And I think it's so important. One of the things that we talk about in coaching, as you know, is that what causes our feelings is our thinking, not the facts of the circumstance, right? Of the situation. The question that I get a lot is if I'm the circumstance in someone else's model, meaning I am the fact in my husband's life or in my child's life or in my mother's life. And she's hurt by something that I did. She's hurt by something that I said, or he is, or whatever. Um, Obviously, I believe it's a misuse of the model to use that to, not I believe, it is a misuse of coaching to use that to, absolve ourselves of responsibility in interpersonal relationships. That's not the point. At the same time, there are some people who might be hurt by something when we had all the right intentions, we had all the right information, and we know that, if someone's their psyche is not in a good place, they're not in a good place with themselves, they might be irrational. They might, take something in the wrong way. They might be quick to anger, whatever the thing is. So how do we come to terms with the fact that, as Jews, we're supposed to be sensitive, we're supposed to be caring, we're supposed to take responsibility. And we also know that we can't actually, if we, anyone who tries to just go around and make sure everyone likes them is going to go crazy within about 24 hours. Like it's just not something that we actually can control. That we don't offend anybody and we don't hurt anybody ever. Everyone likes us. We're pleasing to everyone. And that's to me a recipe for disaster. So what would you say to somebody? How would you find that? I don't know if it's a middle ground or a third option.
So I think like the halacha talks about this very directly when it talks about like we don't say like there's a lot of things that we do in the world, and then we say a bracha on it. We put mezuzah up, we say a bracha. We make kiddush, we say a bracha. We light our candles, we say a bracha. But there's a mitzvah, and there could be a focus whether or not tzedakah is a mitzvah or if it's just following in Hashem's ways. But let's say meiser or things like that, we don't say a bracha on it. And some say the reasons you don't say a bracha on it is because we don't actually know who the other person's going to receive it. Maybe the money won't get to them. Maybe they won't want it. Maybe they won't because there's an other. Because we have a self and my intention was to give them tzedakah, but because I can't say bracha because I don't actually know that it's going to hit home. And this is like a Torah
That's
concept
amazing. I
of
never
that.
knew that before.
Yeah, and we don't say a thing of like, okay, I'm Nasas orphan. Okay, Hashem, Nasher Kedishanu, Chef, Nasas
Right.
orphan. We don't say it because we don't know what the other person's experience is going to be.
Right.
And I think where it comes down to is what you talk about a lot is like, staying in your lane is looking at who am I in myself? If I know the other person has a sensitivity, am I expanding myself as much as I can because I need to be a person who's like Hashem and a person of patience like Hashem? And I need to, for my own self-development, need to, expand myself. Like, I remember I used to have a really hard time with the midst of forgiveness because I always felt like, I'm not saying personally I had that problem, but like the idea of it. Like someone comes up to you, slaps you, and then you didn't ask for them to slap you. They just have a problem and they came and slapped you. And now part of their teshuva process is they have to ask you forgiveness. So now he'll come slap me out of the blue. I didn't ask for your slap. And now I have to be a big person, find inside myself compassion and understanding and find forgiveness in myself. Like I'm just for any of this. Like, don't slap me and don't ask me for to be a bigger person and forgive you. Like, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. And until, having discussed this with many people and teachers and things like that because it's not about, nothing is about anything other than our connection with Hashem and our connection of our own process of growth.
Mm-hmm.
If it's always about growth, then that person needs to slap me because I need to grow in my capacity of processing the thing of forgiveness. So someone has a sensitivity around me. That's them in their other space. I didn't ask them to have that sensitivity. It's really inconvenient for me. It's very frustrating for me. But that was sort of just what was presented to me. And now I, as my own self, and part of my own avoda is to find who am I in this space? How much can I give them? How much can I give them? Who can I extend myself? So can I do something for myself that will give me energy to be able to do that for them?
Yep.
And that it's coming from a place of me and my Bodhisattva Hashem. It's not even about them. It's never really about the other than that's the sort of the stimuli that's being presented to me in this moment as far as my development.
Mhm.
So this sounds like very mechanism and very mechanical and very cold. But like if you think about like the way Rev Dessler talks about it, is the more we see other as ourself and we include them within my like this is my definition. I start here, I end here. This this is my boundaries. This is where I start. But if when I include the other in my boundaries, they sort of are me, and then it becomes more about taking care of myself, which is much more loving and feels much less mechanical. But I find that sometimes the safety of thinking of like, okay, I still maintain my own self in the face of their dangerous problem that they're presenting to me, of them asking me for forgiveness or saying that they need me to answer every text that they respond in 5 minutes. Otherwise, I must be mad at them or whatever their own process in their world is. I maintain myself if I think about the fact that it's me and Hashem.
Mhm.
Can I find compassion in my heart? Can I try and think about what's happening in their world? Can I have love and develop those things? So it's always going to be about self connecting to other, and self is always about me and my biggest self. Like, um, I remember there was this I was a part of this forum, and there was this person that posted on the forum saying, I don't know what to do. I'm going to my mom's birthday party or something, and he was somebody on the spectrum, and he wants to have bring his big bunny rabbit that's like life size, and helps him feel safe in a crowd, and and I want to be able to bring it. He knows his mom hates it, and so all the things on the group were like, you have to take care of yourself. This is what you need to self regulate. This is how you're going to take care of yourself. Focus on yourself, and I was just a little bit surprised because part of his self is that he is a son who's going to his mother's birthday party for the sake of his mother. So, like, if let's say both were taken care of, and to say, like, whoa, you really need a way to self regulate. This way of self regulating is very harmful for the people around you, it's very hard for them. Like, to be able to think, I have a self, I need to figure out how to take care of myself, but maybe I can do it in a way that I'm also thinking about other for myself, because they're saying, oh, your self is your goof that needs to take care of your body. But you
Yep.
also have a soul that is connected to others and has capacity to be bigger than where your boundaries are in this present moment. And sometimes what that looks like is saying no for the sake of saying yes. Like, I know I want to invite this, like this person's always asking if they can come, they want to come. I'm going to say no now because I'm going to then, when I say yes, know that I actually am choosing to say yes. I'm going to have more patience in my heart to say yes.
Mhm.
That these games that we could play with ourselves so that way we feel like, oh, I have this safety, I have this self, I'm going to be okay. The other person's problems aren't going to bulldoze me. I'm choosing not to respond to this text now. Now I just, had relaxed in the outside for a moment, breathe some fresh air, wash my hands in hot water, drink a hot tea, whatever it is that helps ground you. I actually feel like I can respond to this text right now. I don't have to decide every single text in the future what that's going to mean. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is also the piece of transparency, to say, like, I see you're having a really hard time. I wish I could be there for you more now. I'm not available right now, but I wish I could be there for you. I see you're having such a hard time. Where you're sort of acknowledging the other. And when you, in yourself, you really don't have that space, having humility to say, like, I wish I could be more right now. And I wish I could have more patience. I wish I could be more loving right now, but right now I can't. I
Right.
can't do it right now. And but I still see you. You are still allowed to have a self with your struggling of people not responding to your text within the first 5 minutes, with your struggle of, you know, not wanting your son to bring a bunny rabbit, because it goes both ways, like for the birthday, like to be able to have self and to be able to see self and process self and be able to have space for other, to make space for other, because it's really part of ourself. It's not really separate.
Like what you're saying to me is I think, when we look into, let me say this different. I don't want to come down on who's not doing this, like the worlds that are not doing this, but I think what you're saying is this, this is, I think this is kind of like the missing super skill sometimes when we talk about marriage and for sure with parenting. I don't know if it's more common with parenting because it's not my area that I focus on, but we can forget that first of all, our personal growth is something we want. If we want to grow, and that it's not, we're not growing for them, like right, like you're saying in this example, and that is, it can be very motivating. Like if I'm in a situation where my husband's doing something and I'm like, okay, I'm trying, I've got a thought about it, but I'm not quite there and whatever. And like sometimes the answer might just be because I want to be a bigger person. I want to practice this. I want to see if I can grow. And we can kind of bypass a lot of other things when we tune into that part of ourselves. It's like, well, we are, we're going through our lives. We're going through day, like from one day to the next. And we can use that opportunity to become bigger versions of ourselves, become better, as you said, like become more expansive, become more like Hashem. We're going to be going through it anyway. So you might as well
Right.
like grab the growth opportunity on the way. And I find that it can be really helpful. I'm going to say it really fast, but I want to circle back to one thing you said, but I want to make sure that also that you can share a little bit more about like how people can find you and work with you. We're going to have to do something again. I just feel like this is so fun, but
It is
um,
so fun.
I think, and what you were sort of alluding to earlier, I think, or maybe it's a sort of parallel to what you were saying, is this idea that when we think of, going back to like the robot mom or the robot wife, like trying to do everything right, is that if our thought is, I shouldn't yell at my kid, then we want to check in. Now, I don't disagree with the value. We keep it as a value. But if I'm thinking my value, it could be that when I think I shouldn't yell at my kid, I feel shame. That puts me into a shame spiral. And now I'm withdrawing from my child who just got yelled at. And then I'm not being the supportive parent that I want to be. Right.
Yeah, yeah, I just heard a parent say to me like that their child was saying, "Your words are not yelling, but your eyes are yelling."
Oh,
Like, and she was like all proud of herself that she made her words not yelling, which is, I think, an incredible feat.
you're just
But the child's couldn't tell.
amazing.
Yeah,
But what we can do is we can move the value into the R line or maybe, into the result that we're looking for, or into the action. So let's say my action is I don't yell. I would even put that as an action. I don't yell at my kid, because the goal in life is not I don't yell at my kid. The goal in life is I'm a supportive parent, or I connect to this human being, or there's something even greater. And I'm using not
and
yelling to,
sometimes you should yell if your child running into the street.
Mhm.
Yell
Right.
yell
For
with
sure.
all your energy.
Yes.
You know what I
Much as you can. But then we have to, then we work our way back and we're like, okay, so if I want to not be yelling, then how do I need to be feeling? And we won't go into the whole thing, but it's not shame. It's not the shame that sitting there thinking I should be doing this. I should have, made my husband dinner. I should have listened when he was saying this thing. I should have what, when we're busy thinking all the values as opposed to putting them into something practical and figuring out what gets me there. Right. And that's what the model is. That's what we're doing inside the program. Then it can actually like backfire, because we want to know what the values are, but we want to know how to use them, how to get ourselves on board. Oh my gosh, I love this conversation. I love everything that you shared. Thank you so much for coming on.
mean?
And everyone should work with you if they have children. Do you work with people that don't have children? Can people just come to you?
I've worked with like people dating.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's very good
I,
for people. No.
yeah, I'm saying like what happens? I'll be working with a parent, and then they'll say, "Can you work with my child for dating?" But in general, I work with parents because I feel like parents as selves that there isn't like another way for kids to learn skills. Like I remember my math teacher said, like math is not an observational sport. You can imagine what type of math student I was. But that was really because we can't talk about these concepts. We can't talk about like, oh, you should think about his perspective. They only will see it with us actually practicing it, with us actually saying like, whoa, I totally lost it. This is how I apologize. And, oh,
Yeah.
I'm feeling so tired. This is how I can cope with my feeling. And
Yes.
through us showing them actually in real life. So there isn't another shortcut. There isn't like a social skills group to send them to, or a one-to-one. They really need their parents to be the ones to be sharing these things in real life. And the biggest question I get is like, I don't know how to do that. So how can I teach my child? And that's exactly what it's about, is like, we don't have to show them perfectly. We show them in process, because they're not going to be perfect in the day and we're not going to be perfect at the end of the day. But how do I engage in that process? What does it look like? What tools can I use to develop self-awareness and to help my child develop self-awareness, to develop relationship skills, to develop these core pieces of who we are, to connect to ourselves and to be able to connect upward, outward, inward, everywhere.
And then you get
It's
to do
just
the
such a wonderful
growing and the
thing.
work yourself, which is just bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, and then the parent gets to do all the growing and the work themselves, which is just like amazing. Meaning, as working on themselves as a parent, they're going to see the transformation for themselves as a human. That's amazing.
Yeah, and then it's not like my kid has this problem. My kid is rigid thinking. My kid is, work with my kid, they're rigid thinking. Like that sentence is sort of rigid thinking. My kid is rigid thinking. Like, and I'm not saying it laughingly. I'm in the same boat because I'm also a human being. Like there's no one who's
Yeah.
free or exempt from this process. There's no one who's like, oh, I'm as connected to myself as I possibly can be. And people ask me like, oh, do you only work with kids on the spectrum or only kids with ADHD or only with a diagnosis? And no, because there's no one who's free from this. Like that's really the idea of it, is that like whether your child has a diagnosis or not a diagnosis, whether you have a diagnosis or no diagnosis, no one is always as connected as they could possibly be. And there's real ways that we can actually learn to become more connected and to be able to love more and connect more and be more joyful and all these wonderful things and more angry even, that in just it's a great advertisement. Come and we'll learn how to be more, no, for real, like to be real in our relationships and show up authentically in connection.
Amazing. Okay, tell me, we're going to include everything in the show notes that you want for people to connect to you, to learn to connect to others. So books, give us, just in case anyone's not by, what would be the best way
You
for
can
them to be in touch
always,
with you?
I think the easiest way is just to email me, Miriam@skillsforconnection.com or skillsforconnection@gmail.com. Either one, they both come to me. And then from there, you could join my WhatsApp group or email list or whatever, that you can just get these tools
Or they
all
could
the
just start
time.
working with you, like right then.
Or they
Like
can
they
start
could
working
just
with
send
me.
you a message and say, I would like to work with you. You were amazing. I heard you on the How to Grow podcast. You are my person. And in
We
the
could do that
meantime,
also.
you could be working
I'm
with
happy
me
to.
inside my program. Like we could just make this all happen right now. It's perfect.
Well, I'd love to connect with you, all of you. And Kayla, thank you so much for this opportunity to connect with
Sure.
you. Mamash. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. All right. Talk to you soon.
Yes.
Goodbye.
All right, beautiful. Be in touch.
Hey there. If you know a newlywed or you are one, we have a wedding gift for you. Go to kaylalevin.com/newlywed to get access to my best-selling course, First Year Married. You have got to be in your first 6 months, so make sure you don't wait. And if you've been married longer than that, but you're looking for some more support, or this stuff is just super fun for you, I'd love to have you join me inside of my membership community, How to Glow. It's for women looking for a fresh take on relationship development. Join us for live coaching calls, signature classes, and anonymous Q&A. Let's do it.